Greetings friends, I apologize for the extended layoff. As I mentioned in my previous video, there's been a combination of life stuff demanding my attention, which I'm pleased to report has greatly improved since I last checked in with you all, and another channel that I needed to focus on growing in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get in on the ground floor of a new sports franchise as a local in a field I'm extremely familiar with. I'll leave the link up here in the corner to that if you missed it and want to know a little more. In the process of getting the other channel up and running, I've also changed up my method of producing my content a little bit. So let me know down in the comments if you notice and if you like it. Today I'm here to talk about Microsoft's recent rhetoric surrounding backward compatibility, forward compatibility, and preservation. As many of you know, Xbox Division President Sarah Bond recently formed a preservation department within the Xbox Division. But that may not be the amazing news that it sounds like off the jump. There's really a lot that we need to unpack here. This is Little Akiba Games. I'm Patrick. Welcome back to the shop. It's been far too long. As many of you know, Microsoft's formal attempts at carrying out backward compatibility of legacy Xbox and Xbox 360 games came to an end on November 15th, 2021, the 20th anniversary of the brand, with an admittedly impressive wave of games that sent the program out with a bang, but sent it out nonetheless. The reasons cited at the time for the discontinuation were legal, technical, and licensing constraints. That seemed to be the end of it. Microsoft explicitly used the word final in regards to the fall 2021 update, and we went over 2 years without backward compatibility even being brought up by the Xbox division. Fast forward to early April 2024, and Xbox President Sarah Bond sends out an email announcing the formation of a preservation department within the company. Now, this is not in itself a reinstatement of the backward compatibility program, as its mission is explicitly to keep existing compatible games working on future Xbox hardware. That would be forward compatibility. However, there's not really a ton of work for them to do on this front. The adoption of the x86 architecture with the Xbox One should be a permanent one for Xbox consoles moving forward, which I've referred to in the past as the compatibility line. Sony has done the same thing with the PlayStation line of systems. Generally speaking, Xbox One and Xbox Series games should enjoy blanket compatibility with all future Xbox platforms. That is a very welcome new reality for the game industry. Of course, there are fringe exceptions. Games that are technically compatible with the current hardware. They'll run and they're playable, but they don't really run well. Not as well as on their native platforms, at least. It sounds like this is the primary thing the preservation department is forming to get out in front of, which, in a vacuum, obviously that's a good thing. Even with the move to uniform architecture, there's the odd game or two that will slip through the cracks, and it's nice that there's a team in place to catch all those at the point of the generational transition. However, there are legal hurdles to doing fresh work on games with expired licenses, which would fall under the definition of what are called derivative works. Legally, once licensing expires for a game, the #1 cause of delistings incidentally, no further work can be done on it, which includes update patches for backward compatibility. This is something that Microsoft will inevitably run into if they're looking to improve compatibility for Xbox One and Xbox Series games on future hardware. Why is this important to note? Because it implies the presence of a legal team within the preservation department to handle all of that sticky licensing business for them, which is a potential game changer that is now entirely within arm's reach for Microsoft. Remember, 2 of the 3 reasons Microsoft cited for sunsetting the backward compatibility program were legal and licensing, which are kind of one singular, broader reason. Of these issues, the most common such snarls are music and object licenses. If you're playing a game that sourced its music from popular bands, for example, that music isn't available to the publisher in perpetuity. Eventually, those licenses will expire, and the publisher will lose the rights to their own game. Similar with object licenses like vehicles. If a game uses vehicles from real life, it's highly unlikely, though not unprecedented as publishers are becoming wise to this issue and insisting on perpetual contracts, that the licenses to those vehicles will last forever. Once they expire, just like with music, the rights to the game get held up. If a game gets added to backward compatibility while the licenses are still active, that's completely fine. Even if it can't be sold anymore, if the work to make a game compatible is done while derivative works are still on the table, they can stay in place indefinitely, beyond the expiration of the license. This is what happened with delisted games that are still compatible. Where it becomes a problem is in cases where a license expires before any specialized work needed to make the game compatible can be done. At which point, any specialized emulation or patchwork needed to bring the game forward would fall under derivative works and would therefore be illegal without a new license. Keep all of this in mind as we proceed. There's no denying that Microsoft's backward compatibility program, while still being held up as the class of the modern video game industry, is pitiful. The commitment to preservation rings quite hollow when you consider that only about 20% of Xbox 360 games have been moved up to the Xbox One and Xbox Series, and only a meager 6% of legacy Xbox titles have been preserved in kind. That is a pathetic ratio, and only stands out as any kind of positive for Microsoft because Sony and Nintendo aren't even making an effort. The bar has been set so miserably low that 6% 6th gen compatibility and 20% 7th gen compatibility are actually industry-leading figures. Heaven help us. Now, despite the expectations being approximately at ground level today, there have been times in the past when backward compatibility was quite good. The Nintendo Wii had such strong backward compatibility that the system literally doubled as a GameCube, with the Virtual Console program representing active, if woefully incomplete, work on bringing past generations to the system, including platforms outside of Nintendo's purview, which was incredible at the time. Out there in some parallel universe, there's a world where Nintendo simply kept the Virtual Console program active in perpetuity all the way up through the Switch. It's good to dream, right? The PlayStation 2 is another example of backward compatibility done right, this time by including actual PS1 hardware under the hood of the PS2. This was a radical step at the time and probably didn't do the system's $300 price point any favors, but it also certainly didn't hurt sales figures at all, as evidenced by the PS2 still standing, at least for now, as the best-selling game console of all time. The consumer goodwill also can't be underestimated, because 6th gen was right around the time when the systems really started to pile up in the entertainment centers of most dedicated gamers, and the ability to rotate the PS1 out of the lineup was a welcome space saver back in 2000. It should be noted that even with the legacy hardware wired in under the hood, the PS2's backward compatibility was not 100%, with a few outlying titles like Mortal Kombat Trilogy not working that well on the new platform. However, this would represent a similar case as we see with modern backward compatibility, where there's some degree of patching required in order to get things running as smoothly as they can and should. This type of situation was at least the impetus for the new preservation department within the Xbox division. However, let's take note that ironing these matters out would constitute derivative works in cases where that can be legally difficult. There is simply no way that Microsoft is launching this initiative without giving it a legal arm. So why have a legal team and a preservation department that's only in place to pick up a few crumbs here and there? There is so much of Xbox's rich history tied up in expired licenses, of both the first-party and third-party varieties. These lawyers could be heroes to gamers everywhere if they were put to work on the difficult business of license renewal. Take Project Gotham Racing, for example. That series has been effectively Thanos snapped out of existence, largely because of its wide range of licensed vehicles and its eclectic licensed soundtrack that simulates radio stations from around the world. There's probably no shortage of licenses that would have to be renewed before work could begin on getting the games compatible with the Xbox One and Xbox Series, and possibly even relisted on the Xbox Store, which renewed licenses would also open the door for. Would it be daunting work? Absolutely. Would it be a huge victory for preservationists and racing game fans alike? Unquestionably. A big third-party launch game for the original Xbox was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, which is still one of the greatest games in the series, and absolutely the best version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. However, there's still a lot of licensing tied up in both the soundtrack and the lineup of playable skaters. The game itself is now Microsoft property, with the Activision purchase going final, but it would be huge if they could get all of the necessary parties to sign on the dotted line to get it in its rightful place as an active item in the Xbox Store. In another big third-party case, there's Sega with Outrun 2 and Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast, a pair of absolutely brilliant arcade racing games on the legacy Xbox. This is a game long since delisted due to expired Ferrari contracts, but their foundational titles in Sega's work with Microsoft, as Outrun 2 originated on the Xbox-based Chihiro arcade board. These are a huge part of Xbox history worth bringing back, especially since Sega has just renewed the Outrun trademark in an obvious prelude to an Outrun 3 project, most likely in conjunction with the Power Surge initiative. Maybe Microsoft could step in and break the ice between Sega and Ferrari, not only to lubricate relations in advance of Outrun 3, but also to reactivate these outstanding classics from 2 decades ago and drum up further hype for the new game. This benefits everybody. Now, some people are surely thinking that this isn't something Microsoft might necessarily find palatable because it's not something that solely benefits the Xbox brand. But to that, I would just ask those same people if they've been paying attention to Microsoft's priorities in recent years. The odd cultural snarl aside, Microsoft is far and away the most pro-gamer platform holder in the industry, sharing what could easily be their own exclusives with their alleged competition in an effort to benefit gaming as a whole. Yes, I've dragged them for that in the past and will continue to do so in the future, but it also means that becoming a licensed restoration force in the broader game industry is entirely on brand for them. That's something I can absolutely get behind. Yes, this would be far bigger than Xbox. That is not a deterrent for this version of the company. Now let's get a little more radical. A few minutes ago I talked about how the PS2 achieved an exemplary level of backward compatibility by including PS1 hardware, at the time only a 5-year-old system, under the hood of the PS2. In 2028, when Microsoft has its 10th gen platform penciled in for launch, the legacy Xbox will be 27 years old. The Xbox 360 will be 23 years old. At that point you're talking potential SoC, System on a Chip, potential. This would leapfrog technical hurdles and licensing problems altogether. You would be running the games on what is essentially their native hardware and without the need for any specialized emulation code. You aren't producing any derivative works of license-expired games, you're just allowing owners of those games to play them on the new system. It should be noted that this is a double-edged sword, because while it would be an instant solution for making the games playable on modern hardware, you would still have to navigate the licensing territory if you wanted to relist them for future sales. That being said, active or non-licensed games that were only kept out of the backward compatibility program for technical reasons could go right up on the Xbox store that day, and you could still put a legal team to work on the other stuff. Just an idea I wanted to put out there in hopes of maybe getting it some traction in the broader discourse. On an only tangentially related note, I also wanted to take a moment to touch on Microsoft's quite provocative rhetoric surrounding their 10th gen device. For those who missed it, they're promising the quote-unquote biggest technical leap ever in a generation.
And we got more to come. There's some exciting stuff coming out in hardware that we're going to share this holiday, and we're also invested in the next generation roadmap. And what we're really focused on there is delivering the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in a hardware generation, which makes it better.
Friends, I can't see this as anything more than empty hyperbole. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from where I stand, if you could achieve photorealistic 4K visuals at a buttery smooth 120 frames per second, it would still not represent the kind of jump over the Xbox Series X that the Nintendo 64 represented over the Super NES or that the PS2 represented over the PS1. What on earth is Microsoft trying to sell us? That's all for now. If you like this video, then please do me a favor and let YouTube know all about it with your likes, comments, shares, and subscribes. Still shooting for 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2024 despite that little interruption in the month of April, and would love to have you be a part of it. Click the notification bell to know right away when a new video drops. I look forward to seeing you back here next time at Little Akiba Games.